20 years ago, if you had told me I would still be sober 2 decades later, sitting here telling this story with something close to gratitude, I don't think I would have believed you. Back then, I could barely imagine getting through a single sober week without my hands shaking for a different reason than usual. 20 years is a long enough stretch now that I think I've earned the right to tell you some of the things nobody told me at the beginning, the things I had to learn the hard way, one ordinary year at a time. The first thing nobody told me is that sobriety does not feel like happiness, at least not right away, and for a lot longer than anyone warns you. I expected, somewhere in the back of my mind, that quitting drinking would feel like a switch flipping, darkness to light, chaos to peace. What actually happened for at least the first year was something closer to a kind of raw exposure. All the feelings I had spent years quietly managing with alcohol were suddenly just there, unfiltered all the time. Grief I hadn't processed, anger I'd been drowning instead of examining. A kind of boredom that felt almost unbearable at first because I had never, as an adult, sat with an ordinary evening without something to take the edge off it. Nobody tells you that early sobriety can feel worse, in a certain sense, before it feels better, because you're finally feeling things you'd been avoiding feeling for years, all at once, with no buffer left. I want anyone in that first year watching this to know that feeling worse before feeling better isn't a sign it isn't working. It's often a sign that it is. The second thing nobody told me is how long trust actually takes to rebuild, and how little control you have over that timeline. I wanted, especially in that first year, for the people I had hurt to see my new effort and immediately restore the relationship to what it had been before. Some of them did, faster than I deserved. Others took years. A few never fully did, and I had to learn to let that be their right, not a debt I was owed simply for getting sober. I remember, about 3 years in, a specific conversation with a family member who was still guarded around me, still watching, still waiting to see if this time was real. I felt hurt by that at the time. Looking back now, 20 years later, I understand completely. I had broken trust slowly over many years. It made sense that rebuilding it would take years too, not months, and definitely not the handful of grand gestures I wanted it to take instead. The third thing nobody told me is that recovery isn't a single accomplishment you complete and then move past. For a long time, I imagined a day would come when I'd stop thinking about it, when sobriety would simply become invisible, the way not smoking is invisible to someone who never smoked. That day never quite arrived in the way I expected. What arrived instead, over years, was something more like a quiet, ongoing relationship with the fact of who I am and what I'm capable of, under the wrong conditions. I still go to meetings 20 years later, not out of desperation the way I did at the beginning, but because staying close to that truth, rather than drifting from it, is part of what has kept it true. The fourth thing nobody told me is how much of sobriety, especially years in, is simply about learning to live life on its own terms, without the escape hatch I'd relied on for so long. Bad days still come. Grief still comes. I lost my mother 12 years into this, and I remember in the rawest days of that loss, feeling an old familiar pull, a whisper suggesting that just this once, given the circumstances, it might be understandable. What got me through that moment wasn't willpower alone. It was 20 years by that point, of practice at feeling difficult things all the way through instead of around, and a community I could call at 2 in the morning who understood exactly what that particular pull felt like. The fifth thing, and maybe the one I wish someone had told me most clearly at the very beginning, is that the version of yourself sobriety reveals underneath everything alcohol had been managing is not something to fear as much as I expected to. For years, part of what kept me drinking was a quiet terror of who I might actually be without it. The suspicion that underneath the drinking was someone even more broken, more unlikable, more unworthy of the people around me. What I found instead, slowly, over years of sitting with myself without the buffer, was someone more capable than I'd given myself credit for. Not a perfect person, not someone without flaws or hard edges, but someone I have slowly come to actually respect, in a way the version of me hiding behind alcohol never fully could. I want to talk honestly about what these 20 years have actually given me, because I think the picture is more complicated and more real than a simple happy ending. I have relationships today that are deeper and more honest than almost anything I had in my drinking years, including some relationships I nearly destroyed completely before rebuilding them slowly, with a patience I didn't know I had. I have a level of self-respect that took over a decade to build and that I no longer take for granted. I have the specific, quiet satisfaction of having sponsored dozens of people over the years, watching some of them build their own 20-year stretches, knowing I played some small part in that. I also still have hard days, I still occasionally, all these years later, have a dream where I'm drinking again and wake up with a genuine physical wave of relief when I realize it wasn't real. I have learned not to be alarmed by that. It's simply part of what this particular recovery looks like, even decades in, and I no longer take it as a sign that something is wrong. If you're just starting this path, whether it's day one or year one, I want you to hear something clearly from 20 years further down the road than you are right now. It gets better, but not in the fast, dramatic way you might be hoping for. It gets better slowly, unevenly, one ordinary sober day compounding quietly into the next, until one day, the way it happened for me, you look up and realize 2 full decades have passed, and the life you're living looks nothing like the one you were so sure, back at the beginning, you didn't have the strength to build. If you're at the start of this and looking for support, the SAMHSA National Helpline, 1-800-662-4357, is available anytime, free and confidential. And Alcoholics Anonymous meetings exist in more places than you probably realize right now. Tell me in the comments where you are on this road, whether it's day 1 or year 25. I read every one of them, and I mean that. 20 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this life. I'm endlessly grateful I got to find out what it actually looked like, one sober day at a time.